The little black girl texted the biker as unknown riders surrounded the Quarry road in tense, absolute silence. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into the story. A little black girl was running, her breath ragged, as she darted through the alleyways of an old industrial district. Her heart raced as she glanced over her shoulder, knowing the shadows were creeping closer. She had been running for what felt like hours, her feet bleeding from the broken pavement beneath her, but she couldn't stop. The noise of the city had faded into the distance, and now all she could hear was the sound of her frantic breaths and the thundering engines that were starting to close in on her. Her phone, cracked and barely functional, was clutched tightly in her trembling hand. With a final, desperate breath, she unlocked it and typed out a message. Please help. They are coming for me. Please, don't let them get me. She hit send. She didn't know if the message would reach anyone in time, but she had to try. She'd heard stories of the bikers, of the men who roared through the streets, leaving fear in their wake and hope in the hearts of those who needed them. The thought of them gave her strength, even if just for a moment. The seconds dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity as she stood there, crouched against a cold brick wall. She could see the headlights of the vehicles now, gliding down the narrow street. She couldn't run any longer. Her legs were numb, her body was giving out, and she knew she was about to be caught. Just when she thought all hope was lost, her phone buzzed in her hand. A new message from the biker. Hold on. We're coming. With a small sigh of relief, she lowered her phone and turned back to the alley, her heart still pounding in her chest. In the distance, the sound of engines grew. Louder, closer. The bikers were coming, but the question was, would they get there in time? She had to trust them, but trust had never come easy in her life. She had learned to rely only on herself. But now, with the threat closing in, she had no choice but to hope. Hope that the bikers would arrive, hope that they would protect her. But most of all, hope that she wasn't too late. The girl's heart raced as the engines roared louder in the distance, the sound like a distant thunderstorm approaching. The street, usually quiet and abandoned, was now the scene of an impending showdown. She had stopped running, her small, bruised feet barely able to carry her any farther. The cold concrete of the alleyway pressed against her back as she leaned against the wall, hoping the shadows would swallow her whole. She could hear the crunch of gravel under tires, the sound of something big approaching, and it wasn't just the vehicles. She could sense it in the air, the power, the raw force of whatever was coming. She tried to steady her breathing, but every exhale felt heavier than the last. Her fingers gripped the edge of the wall, her knuckles white. Was this it? Would this be the moment she would be caught, dragged away from everything she had left? Or was this her chance? A chance to finally be saved? Her phone buzzed again. She quickly unlocked it, her fingers shaking as she read the new message. We're here. Hold tight. A sense of relief flooded her. She didn't know how, but they were here. The bikers. They had come for her. She took a deep breath and looked around, searching the darkness for any sign of movement. The headlights from the approaching vehicles illuminated the alleyway for a brief moment, casting long shadows that stretched out like hands reaching for her. She stayed still, barely breathing, knowing that the next few moments could determine everything. The sound of the engines grew louder, closer, until it felt like the entire street was vibrating with the power of the machines. And then, she saw them. The bikers. They emerged from the dark, their motorcycles roaring like beasts, filling the alleyway with the unmistakable hum of power. One by one, they came into view, their silhouettes illuminated by the headlights, their faces hidden behind dark helmets. The girl's heart skipped a beat. They were real. They were here. A man at the front, large and imposing, dismounted first. He was wearing a leather jacket adorned with patches, his presence commanding the space as if he owned the street. His eyes met hers, and in that moment, she saw something in them. Something familiar. Something protective. His lips moved as if he was speaking to her, but she couldn't hear over the engines. A wave of relief hit her, so strong it nearly knocked her off her feet. She took a step forward, her body trembling. but the man held up his hand, signaling her to stay back. "Stay calm," he said, his voice low, steady, and commanding. He looked at the other bikers who were now forming a protective circle around the girl, their bikes parked strategically, blocking off any possible escape routes. The tension in the air was thick. "Do you know who they are?" the man asked, his voice still steady. The girl nodded, though her heart was still pounding. "The Serpents," she whispered. The name sent a chill through her. The Serpents were the very people she had been running from. They were known for their ruthlessness, their criminal activities, and their ability to disappear into the shadows. She had barely escaped their clutches earlier that night. The man's eyes darkened. "We'll take care of them," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "They won't lay a hand on you." He motioned to the other bikers, who were already checking their equipment, preparing for whatever was about to come. The air was thick with tension, but also with something else. Something powerful. The girl had never felt safer in her life, and yet, she couldn't shake the fear that lingered in her chest. She had no idea how this would end, but for the first time that night, she felt like there was a chance she might make it through. She looked up at the man, the one who had led the charge. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He gave her a small nod, his face unreadable behind the helmet. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "This isn't over. Stay here." He turned away and began to speak to his crew, issuing orders. The girl remained where she was, her heart pounding as she watched them prepare for the fight. The Serpents would be here soon, and when they arrived, the bikers would be ready. The tension in the air was palpable as the bikers prepared for what was about to unfold. The low rumble of their engines filled the street, mingling with the faint sound of distant footsteps. The Serpents were closing in, their presence like a dark cloud hanging over the alley. The girl, still standing behind the protective wall of bikers, couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The man who had spoken to her earlier, the one with the leather jacket and commanding presence, turned back to face her. His eyes were steady, his movements deliberate. "Stay behind us," he said, his voice a low growl. She nodded quickly, her heart hammering in her chest. She had no idea what was going to happen, but she knew one thing. These bikers were here to protect her, and for the first time that night, she felt like there was a chance for her to escape the nightmare. The leader of the bikers, whom she now recognized as one of the Thunder Wolves, took a step toward the group of menacing figures approaching them. His posture was calm, but there was an intensity about him that sent a ripple of unease through the group of Serpents now coming into view. They were a rough crowd, wearing dark leathers and carrying the weight of years of violence in their eyes. They had come for her, no doubt about it, but they weren't expecting the bikers. The leader of the Serpents, a tall man with cold eyes and a scar running down his face, stepped forward. "You don't belong here," he snarled, his voice low but carrying. The biker leader didn't flinch. "Neither do you," he replied, his voice unwavering. There was a moment of silence, thick and heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then, the Serpent leader took a step forward, his hand resting on the handle of a knife strapped to his side. "Move out of the way, or we'll make you," he said, a cruel smile playing at the corners of his lips. The Thunder Wolves didn't budge. They stood their ground, their bikes positioned like a wall of steel between the girl and the menacing group of thugs. The air was electric, charged with the promise of violence. "You won't take her," the biker leader said, his voice calm but firm. The Serpents looked around at each other, sizing up the situation. There were more of them, but the Thunder Wolves weren't backing down. The girl could feel the tension in the air, her heart racing as she watched the standoff unfold before her eyes. She had no idea how this would end, but she couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. These bikers were her only chance. The Serpent leader sneered, his fingers tapping the handle of the knife. "You think you can stop us?" he spat. "We'll see about that." With a sudden movement, he drew his knife and advanced toward the biker leader. But before he could take another step, the biker leader raised his hand, signaling for his crew to hold their ground. The tension in the air thickened, but there was a sense of control in the biker leader's stance. He wasn't reacting out of anger. He was reacting out of necessity. He wasn't going to let these men get away with anything. "You won't harm her," the biker leader said again, his voice steady, like the calm before a storm. The Serpent leader hesitated, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. He wasn't used to being challenged. He was used to instilling fear, not having it thrown back in his face. For a split second, it seemed like time stopped. The world held its breath, waiting to see who would make the first move. And then, with a flick of his wrist, the biker leader reached for something at his waist. The serpent leader didn't even see it coming. The next thing he knew, the sound of a gunshot rang out, sharp and jarring in the night air. But it wasn't aimed at him. It was aimed at the ground, just in front of his feet. The message was clear: make the wrong move, and the consequences would be dire. The serpent leader stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock. The other members of his gang stepped back, their faces flickering with uncertainty. This wasn't the kind of fight they were used to. The Thunderwolves were playing by their own rules now. The biker leader lowered his weapon and faced the serpent leader. "This ends now," he said, his voice cold and final. The tension that had been building for so long was now at its peak, and the silence that followed was deafening. The girl stood frozen behind the bikers, watching as the scene unfolded before her eyes. She had no idea what was going to happen next, but for the first time that night, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was going to be okay. The serpent leader stood motionless, his expression flickering between anger and fear. His hand twitched near his weapon, but he made no further move. The standoff had reached its breaking point. There would be no more threats, no more violence. It was over. The serpents had been defeated without a single punch being thrown. The girl's eyes filled with tears as the realization hit her. She was safe. For now. She looked at the biker leader, who was still standing tall, his eyes scanning the remaining serpents. He gave her a small nod, as if to reassure her that the worst was over. She smiled through her tears, her heart still racing, but for the first time that night, it wasn't from fear. It was from relief. The bikers had kept their promise. They had protected her. The air was thick with tension, but the bikers stood their ground. The serpents had backed down, but the girl could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She had never imagined she would find herself in the middle of something like this. Yet here she was, surrounded by strangers who had become her protectors. The biker's leader, the one who had spoken to her earlier, turned and approached her. His presence was commanding, his posture strong, but there was something soft in his eyes as he looked at her. He gave her a reassuring nod, the kind that said everything would be okay. The fear that had consumed her for hours began to fade, replaced by a cautious hope. The girl wanted to speak, to thank him, but the words caught in her throat. She had no idea how to express the relief she felt, the gratitude that swelled inside her. Instead, she just nodded back, her hands shaking as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there for a moment, watching her. It was as if he was weighing the situation, considering what came next. Then, after a long pause, he spoke, his voice low but filled with a sense of purpose. "You're safe now. We've got you." The words were simple, but they held a weight that made her shoulders relax for the first time all night. It wasn't over yet, but it felt like the worst part had passed. The bikers gathered around, their attention still focused on the road, but their eyes never straying far from the girl. The leader turned back to his crew, issuing quiet commands. There was no panic, no rush. Everything was calculated, deliberate. The serpents were still lurking, but they had no idea what they were up against. As the bikers checked their gear and made final preparations, the girl stood frozen in place, her heart still racing, but no longer from fear. The leader turned back to her, his gaze softening. "We're going to get you out of here," he said, his voice steady. "But we need to stay alert." She nodded again, unable to speak, too overwhelmed to form words. The bikers mounted their motorcycles one by one, the powerful engines roaring to life. The girl looked around at the group, taking in their serious expressions, their unwavering focus. These were men who had seen things, who had fought battles that went beyond the physical. They weren't just here for her. They were here because they had made a promise, and they would keep it. As the convoy of bikers moved forward, the girl stayed close to the leader, her heart still pounding, but now for a different reason. She had been running for so long, always one step ahead of the danger, but now, for the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't running anymore. She was protected. The road ahead stretched out before them, dark and empty, but the sound of the engines filled the air, a constant reminder that she wasn't alone. The bikers rode in formation, their machines cutting through the night like a force of nature. The leader kept a steady pace, never once looking back, but always aware of his surroundings. His focus was absolute, his experience showing in the way he controlled the ride. The girl couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. She had never been around people like this before. People who understood the meaning of loyalty, of honor, and of protection. The convoy moved swiftly, the headlights of the motorcycles cutting through the darkness. She could hear the wind rushing past, feel the vibrations of the engine beneath her. For the first time in hours, she let herself breathe, the tension in her chest slowly starting to loosen. They didn't speak much during the ride, but the girl didn't mind. She felt safe in their presence, as though nothing could touch her as long as they were there. The road wound on, twisting and turning, but the bikers moved with precision, their movements almost synchronized. It was like they had done this 1,000 times before, each one knowing exactly where to be, when to act, and how to stay one step ahead of danger. The girl glanced at the leader, the man who had become her protector. He was focused, his eyes scanning the road ahead, but when he caught her looking at him, he gave her a small, reassuring smile. "We're almost there," he said, his voice steady and calm. The words sent a wave of relief through her. They had made it this far, and now the end was in sight. As they neared their destination, the leader gave a signal, and the convoy slowed, the motorcycles humming in the night air. They were close enough to see the lights of a safe place ahead. The girl felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her, the adrenaline that had fueled her for so long starting to fade. She had been through so much, but she knew this was just the beginning. She had a long road ahead, but with these bikers by her side, she finally felt like she might have a chance at a future. The convoy came to a stop in front of a small, dimly lit building. The bikers dismounted quickly, their movements precise, efficient. The girl stood still for a moment, taking in her surroundings. It was quiet here, peaceful, but she knew it wouldn't be for long. The serpents were still out there, and they wouldn't give up so easily. But for now, she was safe. And for now, that was enough. The building in front of them was small, but the moment the convoy arrived, it felt like the safest place in the world. The bikers dismounted with practiced precision, their boots thudding against the pavement, the heavy weight of their leather jackets blending with the night. The girl stood there still, trembling, trying to absorb the calm that had replaced the terror that had consumed her just hours ago. The leader of the bikers, his presence as solid and unwavering as the motorcycles they rode, turned to face her. His eyes were softer now, though the intensity of the moment hadn't left him. "You're safe here," he said, his voice steady. "But we need to keep moving quickly. The serpents won't be far behind." She nodded, the weight of his words settling in her chest. She had thought she was free once before, when she had run, but now she understood. Being safe wasn't just about getting away. It was about staying one step ahead. The leader gave a signal to the others, who began to move quickly and silently. The girl was led inside the building, the door closing softly behind her. It was dim inside, the kind of place where people went when they needed to disappear. She glanced around, seeing faces, tough, experienced faces, watching her, but no one said anything. It wasn't the warmth of a home, but it felt like a refuge, a place where she could breathe. The leader stopped by a table, grabbing a map, his eyes scanning it quickly. "We're going to need a plan," he muttered to himself, his hand tracing the roads that lay ahead. The girl couldn't help but watch him. His calm, composed demeanor was a stark contrast to everything she had known. She had spent her life running, hiding, avoiding people who meant her harm, but now, she found herself standing before a group of people who had made it their mission to protect her. She didn't know how to feel. She wanted to trust them, to believe that they would get her to safety, but the fear from earlier still lingered at the back of her mind. The leader glanced at her, noticing her unease. "Hey," he said gently, stepping toward her. "You're not alone anymore." She swallowed hard, looking up at him. "How do you know? How do you know you can stop them?" The leader gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Because we don't leave our own behind." The girl nodded, her throat tightening. She wasn't sure if she believed him yet, but something about the way he spoke made her want to. Outside, the sounds of the engines and the occasional shuffling of feet indicated that the bikers were preparing to move. She didn't know how much time they had before the serpents found them, but she could feel the urgency in the air. The leader turned back to the others, his expression hardening. "We move out in 10 minutes, he said. "We'll take the back roads, keep out of sight. The last thing we need is a confrontation before we're ready." The bikers began to gather their things, checking their gear, ensuring everything was in place. The girl watched them, still feeling out of place. She had never seen such solidarity, such loyalty. These weren't just people trying to do the right thing. They were a family, and they had made her part of it, whether she was ready or not. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. This wasn't over. She knew that. The serpents were still out there, still hunting her. But as she watched the bikers prepare, she realized that for the first time, she didn't have to face it alone. The door opened, and the man who had been leading them turned to her. "You ready?" he asked, his eyes soft but serious. She nodded, though the fear still lingered. She wasn't sure if she could be ready for what lay ahead, but she knew she had no choice. "I'll be right behind you," he said. The bikers moved out, the heavy thrum of their engines filling the air as they mounted their bikes and revved the engines. The girl stepped outside, taking one last look at the building they had used as a temporary refuge. It was dark now, and the world around them felt like it was closing in. She could hear the faint hum of the Serpents' engines somewhere in the distance, and her heart skipped a beat. The leader placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch firm but reassuring. "Stay close," he said. The girl nodded again, tightening her grip on the strap of her bag. She had no idea where they were going, but it didn't matter. The bikers had a plan, and she would follow them, because for the first time, she believed they could keep their promise. As they hit the road again, the girl felt something shift inside her. She wasn't just a runaway anymore. She wasn't just a girl on the run from a past that threatened to swallow her whole. She was part of something bigger now. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she had a sense of direction. The serpents were still out there, still coming for her, but with the bikers by her side, she knew they would face whatever was coming together. And that, in itself, made her feel safer than she had in years. The night was getting colder, and the sound of the motorcycles continued to hum through the streets. The girl, still feeling the weight of everything that had happened, sat quietly on the back of the bike. Her eyes were fixed on the road ahead, but her mind was elsewhere. The fear that had gripped her only hours ago seemed distant now, though it lingered like a shadow. She was still processing what had happened. The serpents, the bikers, the promise that had been made to protect her. But as the wind whipped past her, she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of comfort. She was with them now, with the bikers who had come from nowhere to keep her safe. The leader of the bikers, the one who had spoken to her earlier, had been watching her closely. She knew he was keeping an eye on her, making sure she was all right. They hadn't said much, but she could feel the unspoken understanding between them. She wasn't just some runaway anymore. She was part of their mission. The convoy moved as one, a steady rhythm that was almost hypnotic. The roar of the engines filled the air, and for the first time, the girl allowed herself to relax a little. She still had questions, so many questions, but for the moment, she didn't feel so alone. The group had reached a more isolated stretch of road, far from the noise of the city. The leader of the bikers signaled for the group to slow down, and one by one, they pulled off to the side of the road. The girl looked around, trying to make sense of what was happening. The leader stopped his bike and turned to face her. "We're making a stop," he said. "We need to regroup and make sure we're clear." She nodded, unsure of what to expect next. She had no idea how long they would be on the road or where they were headed, but she trusted them. They hadn't let her down yet. The bikers dismounted their bikes, stretching their legs and checking their gear. The girl followed suit, standing beside the leader as they all gathered in a small circle. The air was thick with tension, but there was a sense of purpose in the way the bikers moved. They were ready for whatever came next. The leader turned to one of his men, a tall figure with a thick beard and a scar running down his face. "You got eyes on the road?" he asked. The man nodded. "All clear for now. No sign of the serpents." The leader seemed satisfied with that answer, but didn't let his guard down. "Good. We keep moving once the group is ready." The girl stood quietly, her heart still racing, but now with a sense of anticipation. She had no idea what was coming next, but the bikers were acting like they had a plan. She trusted them. "You okay?" the leader asked, his voice softer now. She looked up at him, surprised by the concern in his eyes. For a moment, she didn't know how to answer. She wanted to say she was fine, that she didn't need help. But the truth was, she wasn't fine. She hadn't been fine for a long time. She nodded slowly. I'm okay, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He gave her a small, reassuring smile. Good. Just know you're not alone anymore. We've got you. She wanted to believe him, and in that moment, she did. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She was no longer running. The bikers had taken her in, and they were going to keep their promise to protect her. The girl glanced around at the group. They were standing together, speaking in low voices, strategizing, preparing for the next leg of their journey. She felt a little out of place, like she didn't belong in their world of leather jackets, roaring engines, and unspoken codes of loyalty. But as she looked at the group, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she did belong here. The leader came back to her, his expression serious but calm. We'll head out soon. We need to stay one step ahead, but we're not going to let anything happen to you. She nodded again, trying to push aside the lingering fear. For the first time, she felt like she could breathe. The bikers had her back, and with that simple truth, the weight that had been pressing on her chest began to ease. As the group mounted their bikes and prepared to leave, the leader looked at her one last time. You ready? He asked. She took a deep breath and nodded. I'm ready. The convoy roared to life once more, the engines thundering as they sped down the road, heading into the unknown. The girl clung to the back of the bike, her heart still racing, but this time it was for a different reason. This time, it was because she was no longer running. She was moving forward, with the bikers by her side, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't alone. The ride was long, the road stretching out before them like a never-ending ribbon of darkness. The bikers moved in tight formation, their engines roaring as they cut through the night, leaving the safety of the quiet town behind. The girl, still gripping tightly to the back of the bike, felt the wind whip through her hair, the speed of the ride making everything feel more real, more urgent. But even with the speed, she couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't out of danger yet. The leader, the one who had made the promise to protect her, rode at the front, his bike cutting through the air like a beast in motion. The girl couldn't help but watch him, his steady hands on the handlebars, his eyes scanning the road ahead with an intensity she had never seen before. He was a man of few words, but the way he carried himself spoke volumes. He had lived through things, seen things, that she could only imagine. And now, here he was, keeping her safe. It wasn't just the bikers' bikes that made her feel safe. It was the way they moved together, as one unit, with purpose. The way they trusted each other, relied on each other. The girl had never known anything like it. She had always been alone, running from one danger to the next. But now, for the first time in her life, she wasn't running anymore. She was part of something. The convoy continued down the road, the lights from their bikes slicing through the dark. Every few minutes, the leader would glance over his shoulder, checking to make sure everyone was still there, still safe. The girl noticed his attention to detail, his constant vigilance. It wasn't just about getting from point A to point B. It was about making sure they all made it through, together. Hours passed as the convoy pushed forward. The moon was high in the sky now, casting a pale light over the road. The girl's eyes were heavy, exhaustion starting to creep in. She hadn't slept in what felt like days, and the adrenaline from the earlier events was finally starting to wear off. She shifted in her seat, trying to find a more comfortable position, but there was no escaping the weariness in her bones. The leader noticed her movement and turned slightly to check on her. You okay? He asked, his voice calm, like everything was under control. She nodded, forcing a small smile, though her body ached for rest. I'm fine, she said, her voice hoarse. He didn't push her to talk more, just nodded and refocused on the road ahead. They had all been on high alert, but now, it felt like the pace was slowing. Maybe it was the comfort of the night, or the fact that the Serpents hadn't shown up yet, but the tension in the air had lessened. For the first time since she'd joined them, the girl felt herself relaxing, if only for a moment. But as they passed through a narrow stretch of road, she saw it, a glint of headlights in the distance. Her heart skipped a beat. The Serpents had found them. The leader's eyes narrowed as he spotted the lights too. Everyone stay sharp, he ordered, his voice unwavering. The bikers immediately adjusted their pace, their eyes scanning the road ahead. The convoy slowed slightly, forming a tighter formation as the leader gave a signal. The girl's stomach twisted with anxiety. She had hoped they could make it to safety without confrontation, but the reality of the situation hit her hard. They weren't out of danger yet. The lights from the oncoming vehicles grew closer, and the girl could now see the shape of the car in the distance. It wasn't just one car. There were two, and they were moving fast. The bikers braced themselves for what was about to happen. The leader gave a hand signal to his crew, and they began to spread out, creating a defensive perimeter. The engines of their motorcycles roared as they prepared for a possible confrontation. The girl clung to the back of the bike, her heart racing again, the fear creeping back into her chest. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she trusted these bikers. She had to. The car drew closer, and the headlights illuminated the faces of the men inside. They were Serpents. She recognized them instantly, grinning, but his expression was beginning to shift. He wasn't used to being challenged, and something about the unwavering stance of the bikers unnerved him. The leader of the Thunderwolves, standing strong at the front, didn't flinch. His eyes locked on the Serpent, his hand still steady on the handlebars, as if this was just another day in the life of a biker. The leader didn't need to say anything. His presence alone was enough to command attention. The Serpent's grin faltered, replaced by something darker. He took a step forward, looking at the leader with narrowed eyes. "You think you can protect her?" he sneered, motioning to the girl behind the bikers. The leader didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. His gaze was a statement in itself, calm, yet filled with an unspoken promise of violence, if necessary. The Serpent man smirked again, his hand hovering near the gun at his side. "You really want to do this?" The words hung in the air, thick with malice. The girl's heart pounded in her chest. She was no stranger to danger, but the calm way the leader held himself was something she had never experienced before. She could see the other bikers moving in sync, ready for whatever came next, but the leader remained motionless, his eyes never leaving the Serpent. The sound of the engines around them seemed to grow louder, the low hum of the motorcycles adding to the growing tension. The wind rustled through the trees nearby, but everything else was eerily quiet. Then, as if on cue, the Serpent stepped back. His hand dropped from the gun, and he took a long, slow breath. "I didn't think you had the guts," he said, the words coming out in a strained chuckle. The leader of the bikers didn't react to the challenge. He knew that fear was a weapon, and he wasn't about to show it. He had been through enough to understand when to stand firm and when to fight. The Serpent man, still eyeing him with suspicion, finally stepped back, signaling to his men in the car. "This isn't over," he warned, his voice laced with venom. "You'll regret this." The tension didn't dissipate immediately, but the Serpents slowly started to climb back into their car. The leader's eyes didn't leave them until the car started to roll away. The girl watched in silence, her heart still racing, her body tense. She had no idea what had just happened, but she knew one thing. These bikers had just stared down a dangerous gang, and they had won. The leader didn't turn around immediately. He waited until the Serpents were out of sight before signaling to his crew. The bikers relaxed, though the air was still thick with the aftermath of the confrontation. The girl could hear her own breath now, and it felt like a weight had been lifted from her chest. The leader finally turned toward her, his expression calm but unreadable. "You're safe," he said simply, though there was no need for him to reassure her. She knew she was safe, for now. She had never seen anything like it. The way they had all worked together, the way the leader had stood his ground without hesitation. The girl stood still, trying to process what had just happened. It wasn't just about the biker's strength, it was about the loyalty they shared. They weren't just protecting her because it was their job, they were protecting her because she was one of them now. For the first time, she felt like she belonged. The leader gave her a quick nod, as if sensing her thoughts. "Let's keep moving," he said. "We need to get you somewhere safe, away from here. But we're not stopping until you're out of danger." The girl nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and gratitude wash over her. She wasn't sure where they were going, but she trusted the bikers to get her there. They were her family now, and they had made a promise. With that, the leader revved his engine, and the convoy started to move again. The girl felt the familiar hum of the bike beneath her, the speed of the road opening up in front of them. The wind blew through her hair, but this time, it wasn't with the same sense of panic. This time, it felt like freedom. The convoy rode on, the engines roaring in unison, each biker keeping watch, their movements synchronized like a well-oiled machine. The girl clung to the leader, her hands steadying herself on his back. She didn't know what the future held, but she was no longer afraid of it. She was with them now, and as long as they were together, nothing else mattered. The night stretched on, and the convoy continued, cutting through the darkness, moving faster, heading towards the unknown. But the girl knew one thing for sure. With the bikers by her side, she would never be alone again. The night was relentless, and the convoy of bikers pressed on, their engines roaring in the darkness, cutting through the silence with each passing mile. The girl clung to the back of the bike, feeling the wind whip past her, but it wasn't the same kind of fear she had felt before. The fear had shifted. Now, it was a low hum, an undercurrent that thrummed in her chest. The bikers around her were steady, focused, but she could feel the weight of their mission. The leader, who had guided them so far, was still at the front, his eyes sharp and unwavering. He had said they would keep moving until she was safe, and now, that promise seemed like more than just words. It was a vow. As the convoy made its way down the winding road, the girl noticed the pace had slowed. She could see the leader glance over his shoulder at the rear of the convoy, checking to make sure everything was in place. The tension in the air had returned, and she knew something wasn't right. The bikers weren't just riding, they were preparing for something. The girl's heart skipped a beat as she realized they were getting closer to the place they had been heading toward. It wasn't just a safe house or a temporary stop, it was a compound. The leader had told her they were going to a place where she could be hidden, where the serpents wouldn't find her. But the girl had no idea what kind of place this was, only that it was their final destination. Her mind raced as the convoy neared the compound. The buildings loomed ahead, dimly lit by the few lights scattered around. It was more isolated than she had imagined, surrounded by a thick forest and high fences. She had no idea what to expect, but one thing was clear. This place was designed to keep people in and keep people out. As they pulled up to the gates, the girl saw a few figures standing by the entrance, watching the bikers as they approached. The leader signaled to the group, and the convoy slowed to a stop. He dismounted first, his boots hitting the ground with a sharp thud. "Stay close," he said to the girl, his voice firm. She nodded, stepping off the bike and walking alongside him as the rest of the bikers followed suit. The air felt thick with expectation, and the girl's heart pounded in her chest. She had been running for so long, but now, she was here. She was finally at a place where she could be safe, or at least, that's what she hoped. The figures by the gate didn't move at first, just stood there, watching them. Then one of them, a tall man with a weathered face, stepped forward. "We've been expecting you," he said, his voice low, but there was a sense of recognition in his tone. The leader gave a short nod, his face unreadable. "We've got her," he said simply. The tall man eyed the girl for a moment before turning back to the gate. "Come in," he said, motioning for them to follow. The girl hesitated for a moment before stepping forward, the sound of her boots crunching against the gravel. She wasn't sure what to expect here, but the way the bikers had moved so effortlessly into the compound made her feel like this place wasn't just a hideout, it was a sanctuary. The gates creaked open slowly, and the girl's breath caught in her throat. The compound was bigger than she had thought, with buildings scattered throughout the area, each one seeming to serve a different purpose. Some looked like living quarters, while others appeared to be storage. Everything was secure, locked down, designed for survival. The tall man led them into one of the larger buildings, and the moment they stepped inside, the girl felt a sense of calm wash over her. The interior was dimly lit, but it was clean, organized. There were a few people inside, some sitting at tables, others walking around with purpose. It felt like a small community, one that had been built for this very purpose, to protect and survive. The leader motioned for the girl to sit at one of the tables, and she obeyed without hesitation. The bikers began to fan out, talking in low voices, checking their gear, and securing the building. The tall man who had greeted them earlier moved toward a desk in the corner of the room. "This is the safe house," he said, turning back. "To face them. You'll be safe here. No one gets in without our say-so." The girl's eyes widened. She hadn't realized just how hidden they had been. This place was more than just a hideout. It was a fortress. "How long will we stay?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The leader, still standing by the door, turned to look at her. "As long as it takes," he replied. "You'll be safe here. No one is going to find you." The girl nodded, trying to process everything. It was hard to believe after everything she had been through. But looking around at the bikers, at the way they moved with purpose, the way they had already claimed this place as their own, she felt something inside her shift. She wasn't just a burden to them anymore. She was part of their mission. They had made it clear that they would protect her, and they had kept their promise. The girl's eyes flicked to the leader, who was still scanning the room. He caught her gaze and gave a small nod. "Rest for now," he said. "Tomorrow, we figure out what comes next." She couldn't believe how much had changed in such a short time. She was no longer running, no longer alone. She was part of something, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt like she belonged. The room was quiet, but the air was heavy with anticipation. The girl sat at the table, her fingers tapping nervously on the wood. She had been here for a while now, surrounded by the bikers, and for the first time, she was beginning to feel the weight of what had happened to her. The relief that had flooded her when they arrived at the compound had started to fade, replaced by an unsettling silence. She glanced around the room, watching the bikers move with practiced precision, each of them securing their position, checking their gear. It was clear they were ready for anything, but the girl couldn't shake the feeling that the calm would soon break. The leader, the man who had promised to keep her safe, was standing near the door, talking to a few of the other bikers. His expression was serious, his voice low as he discussed their next steps. The girl knew they weren't out of danger yet. The Serpents were still out there, and the bikers couldn't afford to let their guard down. After a few moments, the leader turned to her, his eyes meeting hers. "We need to talk," he said. His tone was calm, but there was a firmness to it that made her stomach tighten. She nodded, standing up from the table and following him to the corner of the room. As they walked, she felt a sudden wave of exhaustion hit her. She hadn't realized how tired she was until now, the adrenaline that had kept her going for so long beginning to wear off. The leader noticed her unsteady steps and paused. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, though she wasn't sure if she believed it. She was safe for now, but the uncertainty of what came next weighed heavily on her. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep it together. "We're going to need to move soon," the leader continued, his voice low. "The Serpents won't give up easily, and if they've figured out where we are, they'll come for you. We can't stay here for too long." The girl swallowed hard. The weight of his words hit her like a brick. She had been hoping for some kind of peace, some time to breathe, but now it seemed like the fight wasn't over. The bikers were ready to fight. She knew that, but she had no idea how long they could keep going. "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. The leader met her gaze. "We get you to a safer place. Somewhere the Serpents won't find you. We're not leaving until you're safe, but we need to move quickly." The girl nodded again, trying to steady her breathing. She had no choice but to trust him, but the thought of leaving this place, of moving again, made her feel like she was running in circles. She had been running her whole life, and she was tired of it. But as she looked at the leader, something inside her told her that this time, it was different. He wasn't like the others who had left her behind or betrayed her. He had promised to protect her, and she believed him. The bikers started to gather their things, preparing for the next phase of the plan. The girl watched them, feeling both comforted and scared. They were strong, capable, but she could see the seriousness in their eyes. They knew what was at stake. The leader walked back to her, his footsteps steady and purposeful. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch firm but reassuring. "We'll get you through this," he said. "You're not alone anymore." The girl looked up at him, her heart swelling with emotion. She didn't know how, but somehow, she knew he was right. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone. The bikers moved out of the room, their footsteps echoing through the compound as they made their way to the bikes. The girl followed them, her legs feeling heavy but determined. She was ready to leave this place behind, ready to face whatever came next. As they stepped outside, the cool night air hit her, and she took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The convoy was already lined up, the bikes roaring to life one by one. The leader was at the front, waiting for her. "Let's go," he said, his voice calm and steady. She climbed onto the back of his bike, feeling the vibrations beneath her. The convoy moved out, the roar of the engines cutting through the night like thunder. As they sped down the road, the girl's heart began to calm, the rhythm of the ride soothing her nerves. She didn't know where they were going, but it didn't matter. She was with them now, and as long as they were together, she knew she would be okay. The road stretched out before them, winding through the darkness, But for the first time, the girl didn't feel like she was running. She was moving forward. The convoy sped on, the lights from the bikes cutting through the night, the sound of their engines filling the air. The girl clung to the leader's back, her mind racing, but her body felt strangely at peace. She wasn't alone anymore. She was part of something bigger, and for the first time, she believed she might actually have a chance to live a life free from fear. The convoy sped down the winding road, the sound of the engines filling the night air, drowning out everything else. The girl clung tightly to the back of the leader's bike, her mind racing but her body growing more accustomed to the rhythm of the ride. The wind whipped past her, cold against her skin, but she didn't mind it. It felt freeing, in a way. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't thinking about the past. She wasn't thinking about the serpents or the danger that still loomed over her. She was just riding, moving forward. The leader glanced over his shoulder, his eyes scanning the road ahead, and then meeting hers for a brief moment. There was no need for words. She knew he was watching over her, just as he had promised. He had kept his word so far, and she had no reason to believe that would change. Still, the nagging feeling in the back of her mind didn't go away. The serpents were still out there, still hunting her. She could feel the weight of that reality pressing down on her, but she pushed it aside. They would deal with it. They had a plan. The convoy made a sharp turn, and the girl felt the bike lean with the curve. The familiar, steady rumble of the engines filled her ears again. As they traveled further into the night, the trees began to thin, and the open road stretched out before them. The leader signaled for the group to slow down. One by one, the bikers pulled off to the side of the road, their headlights cutting through the darkness like a beacon. The girl felt her heart rate increase slightly. She knew the break was coming, but it still didn't ease her nerves. The bikers dismounted quickly, their movements efficient, and the girl followed the leader as they made their way toward the small clearing in the woods. "Stay close," he said softly, his voice steady and calm. She nodded and stuck close to him as the rest of the group fanned out to keep watch. There was a brief moment of silence, broken only by the rustling of the trees in the breeze. The girl looked around, trying to take in her surroundings. The compound they had come from was far behind them now. This was a temporary stop, a chance to regroup before they moved on. The leader was scanning the area, his eyes alert. He wasn't letting his guard down, not for a second. "We're not out of the woods yet," he muttered, mostly to himself, though the girl could hear him clearly. She knew what he meant. The serpents could be anywhere, and if they had tracked them this far, they had to be cautious. The bikers formed a loose circle around the girl, each of them checking their bikes, making sure they were prepared for whatever came next. The leader turned to her again, his gaze softening just a bit. "You good?" he asked. She met his eyes, forcing herself to smile, though she could still feel the lingering anxiety in her chest. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Just tired." He nodded, understanding. "We'll keep moving soon," he assured her. "You're doing good. You're safe here." His words, simple as they were, brought a sense of comfort to her. She hadn't realized how much she needed that reassurance until now. The night was cold, but the warmth of the group, the sense of protection, made the chill bearable. The leader stepped back, signaling to the others. "Get ready. We move in 15, he said, and the bikers immediately began to prepare. The girl stayed where she was, watching them work. It was almost like they were a family, each one with their own role, their own responsibility, but all of them working together as a unit. It was a strange feeling, this sense of belonging. She had spent so long feeling like an outsider, always running, always hiding. But now, for the first time, she felt like she had a place, a purpose. The leader walked over to her, his footsteps firm on the ground. "We're going to keep you safe," he said, his voice low but resolute. "No matter what." She nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. It was hard to believe that after everything she had been through, after all the years of hiding and running, she had finally found people who cared. She had found a family. The convoy began to move again, and the girl climbed back onto the bike, settling herself into position behind the leader. The engines roared to life, the sound vibrating through her as they sped off down the road. The wind whipped against her face, but this time, it felt different. She wasn't running anymore. She was moving forward, with the bikers by her side. As the convoy moved on, the girl felt a new sense of determination building inside her. She wasn't just a victim of the past anymore. She was part of something greater, something that would protect her no matter what. The serpents might still be out there, but she wasn't alone. With the bikers by her side, she had a chance, a real chance, at a future. And for the first time in a long time, that future didn't seem so far away. The convoy continued down the darkened road, the rumbling of the engines echoing through the still night air. The girl clung tightly to the back of the bike, the wind whipping through her hair, but for the first time, she didn't feel the rush of fear she had felt earlier. She was no longer running. She was moving forward with the bikers by her side. The leader of the convoy kept his eyes trained on the road ahead, but every now and then, he glanced back at her, ensuring she was still there, still safe. His gaze was steady, confident, a reminder that they were in control, not the fear that had ruled her for so long. The girl didn't know exactly how long they had been riding, but the feeling of being in constant motion had become a strange kind of comfort. As the miles passed, she felt her body relax, the weight of her past lifting bit by bit. She wasn't sure where they were heading, but the leader had said they would keep her safe. And for the first time, she believed him. The road stretched out before them, endless and dark, but the convoy moved as one, a tight-knit unit, synchronized in their purpose. The girl glanced at the bikers around her, noticing how they worked together, how they communicated without speaking, each one aware of their role, their responsibility. It was more than just protection, it was family. And for the first time in her life, the girl felt like she was part of something bigger. The convoy finally slowed as they approached another stop, a small gas station on the side of the road, lit only by the faint glow of a few scattered lights. The leader signaled for everyone to dismount, and the bikers began to stretch and move about, checking their bikes, refueling, and preparing for whatever came next. The girl followed the leader as he walked to the back of the station, his steps sure and deliberate. The tension in the air was palpable, but there was something in the way he moved that made her feel like they were in control, like they had a plan. As they approached the building, the leader turned to her. "We're going to take a break here," he said quietly. "Stay close. Keep your eyes open." She nodded, though the weight of his words settled in her chest. It was clear that they were still on high alert, still expecting the serpents to show up at any moment. The girl glanced around the gas station, her eyes scanning the shadows, but she didn't see anything out of place. Still, the feeling of unease didn't go away. They weren't in the clear yet. The leader motioned for her to stay by the side of the building while he spoke to one of the bikers. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she could see the serious expressions on their faces, the quiet urgency in their movements. After a few minutes, the leader returned to her, his gaze scanning the area once more. "We're good for now," he said, though his voice held a note of caution. "But we can't stay here too long." She nodded again, feeling the weight of the situation pressing on her chest. She had no idea how long they could keep running, how long they could stay ahead of the serpents. But as the leader led her back to the bikes, she realized something. She wasn't as scared as she had been before. The bikers were here, they had her back, and they would protect her. That thought was enough to give her strength. The engines roared back to life as the convoy readied to move once more, the sound filling the air like a promise. The leader was at the front again, his bike steady and powerful, and the girl followed behind him, her heart still racing but no longer from fear. The convoy moved out, the bikes cutting through the night like a storm, unstoppable. She could feel the rumble of the engine beneath her, the steady beat of the road beneath her tires, and for the first time in so long, she felt like she was moving in the right direction. The girl didn't know where they were headed, but she knew one thing for sure: they would get there. She wasn't running anymore. She was fighting alongside the bikers, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she had a purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, but with the bikers by her side, she felt like she could face anything. The serpents were still out there, lurking in the shadows, but the girl knew that with the bikers leading the way, they would never catch her. She had a new family now, and they would keep her safe, no matter what. The convoy had been riding for hours now, the road stretching ahead like an endless dark ribbon. The girl, still gripping the back of the bike, couldn't help but feel a sense of finality settling in. They had been through so much already, and though the fear had not completely faded, something inside her had changed. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she wasn't looking over her shoulder, waiting for the next blow to fall. She was moving forward, and for once, she wasn't running. The leader of the bikers, still riding ahead of her, had made good on his promise. He had kept her safe, surrounded her with people who cared, and most importantly, made her feel like she belonged. They had been a family, whether they had known it from the start or not, and it was something she never expected to find. The leader had said they were heading to a place where she could truly start over, a place where the serpents wouldn't be able to reach her. But she wasn't sure what it would look like. The future seemed like a distant idea, something she hadn't allowed herself to believe in until now. The convoy slowed as they neared a clearing. The trees parted, and the girl saw the faint outline of a structure ahead. It wasn't much, just a small cabin surrounded by a thick forest, but the moment she saw it, she knew this was the place. This was where everything would change. The convoy rolled to a stop, and the leader dismounted first, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. The others followed suit, each one moving with the precision of a well-oiled machine. The girl stepped off the bike, her legs unsteady from the long ride, but her mind clear. She could see the others securing the area, checking their surroundings, but for a moment, everything felt still. The leader turned to her, his eyes softening when he saw her expression. "We're here," he said simply, though the weight of the words hung in the air. She nodded slowly, unsure of what to say. She had been here before, arriving at places that promised safety, only to be betrayed. But this time, it felt different. She wasn't alone, and for once, she wasn't just a survivor. She was part of something. "Is this?" she started, but the words trailed off. She didn't need to finish the sentence. The leader understood. "This is where you can finally be free," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. She looked around, taking in the quiet, the peacefulness of the place. It was nothing like the life she had known. There were no threats lurking in the shadows, no serpents waiting to strike. It was just calm. She had no idea how long it would last, but in this moment, it was enough. The bikers began to move toward the cabin, unpacking their gear and making themselves comfortable. The leader stayed close to her, his presence a constant source of strength. "You should rest," he said, his tone gentle. "You've been through a lot." She nodded, though she wasn't sure if she could sleep. Her mind was still racing with everything that had happened. But for the first time, she allowed herself to relax, to breathe without the weight of fear hanging over her. The leader's eyes lingered on her for a moment before he turned to join the others. The girl watched him walk away, but instead of feeling alone, she felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't hiding. She was here. And no matter what the future held, she was ready to face it. The night grew colder, and the sound of crackling fire filled the air as the bikers gathered around a small campfire outside the cabin. The girl walked toward them, taking a seat at the edge of the circle, feeling the warmth of the fire against her skin. She wasn't sure what to say, but the bikers didn't expect her to speak. They were quiet, respectful, as if giving her the space she needed. The leader, sitting across from her, glanced up and gave her a small nod, a silent acknowledgement that everything was going to be okay. The girl smiled faintly, her first genuine smile in days. She was part of something now. The night passed in a haze of quiet conversations and laughter. The girl didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew she wasn't facing it alone. The bikers had become her family, and she had found something in them she never thought she would find, a place where she was safe, where she belonged. As the fire died down and the sounds of the night filled the air, the girl closed her eyes for the first time in what felt like forever, letting the warmth of the fire and the presence of her new family lull her into a sense of peace. Tomorrow would come, but for tonight, she was exactly where she needed to be.